Hi, everybody, and welcome back to yet another cracking installment of the Matt Brown Show. This is the Secrets of Fail series where we're talking to founders, entrepreneurs, CEOs, all about their epic business blunders and what they've learnt in the process. So with us in the hot seat today from the bright lights of New Jersey is Adi Siegel, the CEO and founder of Happy.com, which we're going to get into. Adi, welcome to the show, dude.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt.
Privilege is all mine, man. So let's start with the elevator pitch. What are you guys up to there at Happy?
Very simple. Happy provides non-clinical emotional support. So what does that mean? It's active listening as a service. 24/7, we have someone you can connect with.
Wow. So what's the problem there? So I'm feeling down and emotional because I've had a failure and I want to talk to someone. Is that pretty much the
perfect for CEOs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But the issue that I would say, if we go really macro, then take the largest pandemic in the world right now is loneliness. 1 in 4 adults identify as lonely, and sometimes you see that stat up to 60%. And the main issue with that, as the research shows, is really human connection. And this fun thing we call social media, maybe some place where people will stream this eventually, right, is actually disconnecting us more than it's connecting us. And, you know, we call it social media now, but it was originally called social networks, right? Yeah. And they make you feel like crap most of the time, Matt. I'm sure you see that, right? You end up, LinkedIn was supposed to be positive, and LinkedIn's the only social that I have. And you find yourself doom scrolling. It's like, shoot, I didn't sell my company. I didn't get a raise. I didn't transfer to the newest, hottest startup. What's going on? And it's even worse when you go into your social life and your family life and you see everyone else's best fake life, and you're just sitting in front of your screen. So what we're doing is providing real, actual human-to-human connection in any type of conversation. Basically, on our calls, everything is on the table. Our listeners are fully trained and certified in listening and emotional intelligence, and anyone can call in any time of day. People use it as their own connection, and they also use it. You would think, oh, is this replacing therapy? It is not. That is not what we're looking to do. People use it in between. People use it when their therapist won't answer the phone at 2 a.m. when you're tossing and turning in bed. So we serve a lot of different needs.
Such an interesting insight, right? And I totally agree with you. I personally hate social media. I personally hate it. And it's weird because I have to do it. You know what I mean? But I hear what you're saying, right? About, and you know, and another, I say this on the intro on the series sometimes, I say, you know, the stuff that you'll hear on this show, on this series specifically, is not the sort of stuff you'll hear on LinkedIn, or no one's going to talk about their fuck ups there, you know, because to your point, it would, like, it's reputational damage, you know.
Totally.
And but I think this is why I like doing this series, because it is letting everyone else know that what you see on LinkedIn's timeline is not actually what really goes on. And, you know, the magazine covers and the paid PR and the, you know, it's like, listen, bro, I've been around the bush. And to be fair, like, I actually like YouTube and a podcast because there's no timeline, right? It's purely like you judged on the basis of your content and your story. Whereas, you know, I think with everything else that goes on Facebook and Instagram, it's like how you look and who you socialize with and what awards you've won, which makes me sick. You know, I hate these creative agency guys where they're like posting all their, like, look at all the bookmark awards we've won. And it's like, no, it's a circle jerk, bro. No one gives a shit. Only you do. It's like, well done. You know, you competed against like no-name agencies down in the middle of Africa. Like, you know, like no one cares, bro.
How about the other secret that most awards, you know, Forbes 30 under 30, 40 under 40, you apply for those and sometimes even paid to get them at the end of the day.
You pay, dude. Do you know that you can pay for pretty much every achievement that you can think of? If you want to be, I can be a New York Times best-selling author in 12 weeks from today. All I have to do is cough up, I think it's $40,000. Right?
Yeah.
And there's companies that will do that for you, and they will guarantee your bestseller position. You know what I mean? And so the narrative, and to your point, the impact of this whole ecosystem is to your insight, right? It's that, you know, we're actually lonely, like, especially in men founders. Like, I think we are more lonely than ever. I mean, like, there's a lot of, you know, guys, like, business owners, entrepreneurs, whatever, like they're doing these coaching programs for men to cure this kind of like loneliness idea, right? Where it's like, we're going to make you the man that we know that you can be, and they put you through hell physically and, all these kind of things just because they want to shake your ass up, man, and go, listen, the shit you see on social media, it's like, it's not real. It's not the full, it's real, but it's not the full story,
Yeah, and you've actually hit on something really interesting, which we talk about a lot too, which is specifically men. And it's for two white men to sit here and say life hasn't been good for us or we don't have privilege in society would be the wrong message, because I think we should acknowledge that. On the other hand, we've also been stunted in our emotional growth throughout all of history. The fact that we can't have emotions and cry or hold hands or hug, any of these things that are totally normal for women, men have not been allowed, quite frankly, allowed to do. And so the research is showing right now that men are falling quite behind women. And then, so you're not getting an education, you're not finding meaning, and therefore you're not becoming an eligible mate for women. And it is just this terrible cycle that keeps getting worse and worse. And especially for those who didn't, get out from high school, right? If you don't graduate high school and you don't go to college, or, there are plenty of other jobs that you can have without going to college. But if you can't make that pivot to a career, the data show right now that the trajectory of your life is not great. And it's specifically for men, for white, uneducated, lonely men. It is a dangerous time for society because of how men react to that. In particular, whether it's the incel movement or an insurrection on the Capitol a few years ago, it's because people don't feel connected and they don't feel heard. And so one of the things that we can do at Happy is bring people together. And the thing I didn't mention, Matt, is that our app is audio only and anonymous. So you can be whoever you want on our app. We have connections between people who would never meet in normal society, finding really deep human connection by having these phone calls on our app.
Very, very interesting, dude. Feel like we should be spending more time on this subject. Different show. But we don't have time for that. We got to get on to the secrets of fail, story of fail. So what is your story of fail, Adi, for our audience around the world today?
I built an entire company around a premise that I thought was the truth and what was needed in the market. And it turns out the incentives were just not aligned. After years of building it, I raised money. The name of the company was See-Through, and we were building a marketplace for transparent healthcare pricing, something severely needed in the U.S. For those who come from other developed countries, actually every other developed country, they will know that there is better healthcare there. Even if you have a long wait, at least you don't go into debt for paying for your MRI. Not the case in the U.S. And so the notion was that free market economics will solve anything in the US, right? The invisible hand, if you will, Adam Smith's invisible hand. And so I built a whole marketplace, raised money. I was having meetings on Capitol Hill and at the White House and with insurance companies and providers. Now, the failure was, after a certain amount of time, when we were ready to go and launch the platform, even though in their own silos, every part of healthcare said, yes, Adi, we're in, no one would sign the final contracts. And as a CEO, a very now wealthy physician founder of a large urgent care practice in New York, told me, he said, Adi, I was sitting in his high-rise office at this point, right? His company had sold for hundreds of millions of dollars to private equity. And he said, Adi, I absolutely love your idea. I really like you and believe that you can do it, but you have to understand our entire business is built on payer meaning insurance companies, payer contracts. So if I tell See-Through that to walk in our urgent care clinic is $95 cash price, every other company, Blue Cross, Aetna, everyone's going to come to us and say, hey, what are you doing, man? We're paying you $250 per visit. We're dropping our prices because we know that you're willing to accept $95. That's how the free market works on the clinic side. And so the failure was just simply not realizing. I'd spent a lot of time in clinical medicine, a lot of time in healthcare policy and healthcare economics, but not realizing at the core level what the truth of the industry is, which is there are zero incentives right now within healthcare to be transparent and to actually get the care to a patient at the cost that is appropriate for everyone.
Very, very interesting. So what transpired from there, and what did you learn as a consequence of that experience?
So what transpired is eventually we had to close the company. Even today, I would say that there are some major VC-backed companies that are working on price transparency, and there's even a price transparency law that now exists. But any company or healthcare system that's making billions of dollars a year in income is willing to pay a $2 million fee to not be transparent, right? It's just like, again, the incentives are not aligned. So what I learned from that in general is maybe start with the basics. Don't have your grandiose mission out there. Just test it with one clinic. Don't go build a whole network of everyone who you believe will be on your side. Just try it in one place, one time, with very little technology, and see if it works.
Mm-hmm. So, Adi, if you could go back in time, what would you do differently?
I would have prototyped more. I probably would have had more conversations. And I would have tried to prove it out, the actual business model, with just one clinic, not a whole network. Say, okay, clinic X, and you take something that should be pretty easy, let's say radiology. And we were actually doing this, but I wasn't focused enough on looking at let's just do radiology. Let's not even do all of radiology. Let's just do x-rays for broken ankles, right? That's an emergency, more or less. You can get people in the moment and they don't want to spend a lot of money at the ER. Let's drive them to your clinic. You're just doing x-rays, which means your price can be a lot lower, and we'll put out a cash price there and see if people pay for it. And by the way, we're not going to develop a whole fancy payment system right now. We're not going to try to be part of your medical records. We're just going to see if people will basically take the bait or the new offering, and if they come in and do business with us for that specifically. If that works, then we'll build the mansion. Then we'll build the kingdom and the universe.
Such good advice. And speaking of advice, what is your advice around, or to CEOs rather, in terms of the importance of failing in business success?
The only way to learn is to fail, right? I'm sure you've heard that on this show many times before. But because of the makeup of the entrepreneur and the entrepreneurial mindset, we don't read textbooks. There are lots of textbooks written on how to be a CEO, how to go to good to great, 0 to 1, traction, all these great titles. I'm looking at my bookshelf across the office here. I have them all. Are there tidbits in each of them that are good to know? Sure. Are there certain maybe operating manuals that can work along the way? Sure. But you're not going to learn the big things about business, about how to do business, how to structure it, how to even pitch without failing. Many, many, many times. The person I actually love following most right now on LinkedIn is Mark Randolph. He is the founder. Everyone knows Reed Hastings as the founder of Netflix. They were actually co-founders. Mark's the other guy. He was the first CEO, actually. And he has been writing about his 25 years of failures. He had some successful companies, but just the idea that it all almost doesn't have to work before it does work. And there are very few people who make it with their first startup. And anything that you see as an overnight success story is probably a 7 to 20 year overnight success story.
Yeah, it's such a truism that, right? Like it takes 15 years to become an overnight success. Like I've said that many, many times. I mean, there's one guy who's a cousin or something like that, his uncle, whatever, sort of like immediate family relative. He's a billionaire and he was literally like not wealthy for 20, 30 years. And he said, look, that's what happens. You spend 20, 30 years failing and learning what not to do so that you can figure out what you should do in order to get something to a point where you can scale it and flip the thing and sell it and have a liquidity event. That's the true story. Yet we are, to what we were saying up front, right? Like the LinkedIn timelines and the shit we see on social media feels like, oh, everyone's so successful all the time. But it's like, yeah, but you could have, like I was there once, like I had an amazing personal brand. I was like pretty famous in South Africa and I was broke. Broke, dude.
Yeah.
And this is the true story, but I want to double click on your book. So you mentioned 0 to 1. Are there other books or tools or resources, Adi, that you recommend? You know, the shit that's sitting on your bookshelf there, that you feel are good tools or resources to use as a CEO?
Sure. So 0 to 1 is actually pretty good by Peter Thiel and forgetting the other guy who wrote it with him. There is another book called Talking to Humans. It's probably my favorite book. It's a tiny little pamphlet, and it goes over the story of how you can invent the most amazing product in the lab and then it fails. It's kind of like what we were just talking about. And the concept is telling all founders that you have to get out there, get to the street. That is the hardest hump to get over, is to have a conversation with someone you don't know about what you're building and be able to receive feedback. Bring that prototype out there. Don't wait until you have the perfect product. You know, Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn, and before that PayPal, always says, if you like what it looks like, you've waited too long. And I think that's a great lesson. I do think that in, Internet 2.0 and 3.0, it's a little harder to not have a perfect, especially in the app world. You kind of have to look professional. You were talking about a personal brand. It was easier in the PayPal days to kind of look janky. Yeah. So from a design perspective, you do have to look good, but from a feature perspective, just try one thing at a time. And so those are some books. Traction, I also mentioned, is a pretty good book for the entrepreneur operating system. What I have found, even in operating our company now, is you really do have to modify some of these models for what works for your company. Take these as a suggestion, not the rule, and make it what it needs to be for your own reporting in a company. Take your own path. Don't take anyone else's mission as and success as what you should be doing in particular, but you can learn from them a little bit.
That's a really good point. I've caused myself huge mental stress when I was young, because you would read these books and it'd be like, this is how you create wealth, or this is how you do X. And you would take those doctrines as doctrines, or those formulas as truisms, or the proof, the only way. And when it didn't work, because you change the context, you change everything. Even though the formula can work for someone in a particular context, type of business, stage of company, whatever, you change the context, you try and shove it into your own world, and it doesn't work. Like, what do? Well, was it the fact that the formula was incorrect, or was it the fact that it doesn't just work for you? So you need to take what you think will work for you and leave the rest. Like, don't worry about it's not a copy paste method in anything. And when I was young, I didn't know that. And so,
I think another thing, Matt, is looking at examples. We're so quick. Forget LinkedIn, where it's like social and we kind of know the people. But you look at the news, you look at these Forbes lists, and you're like, shit. Are we allowed to curse on this podcast?
Yeah.
I'm 25 and I'm not a billionaire yet. Right? You were talking about being famous and being broke, right? And by the way, I bet you were also pretty lonely and disconnected, right? Because you were on your own mission and no one gets it. Your parents don't get it. Your partners don't get it. Your friends who went to medical school and law school certainly don't get it, right? And so I think that we too quickly look at the people on the cover of Forbes magazines and Times magazines and say, damn, how am I not there yet? Well, also, most of those people are now in jail. So, because they're frauds. And the other people who have been successful over time, I think there's two things to realize. One, I'm not a big believer, and I would challenge anyone else to show me real rags to riches stories. This myth of Horatio Alger's rags to riches. There's very few of those stories. Most of the big companies that we saw, let's just say Microsoft, Google, and Facebook, right? These were privileged kids. Okay, Google, they were immigrants for sure, but they were privileged. They were at top tier universities in engineering programs who had training as children in coding. And sure, did they have a breakthrough technology at the right time with the right people around them? Yes, but they didn't come from nothing. And so you just have to remember that privilege helps. It's a lot easier to get to the last step if you start on the 20th. So that's another big thing that as we're talking about all this comes to my mind is, don't take books as doctrine, and don't take media. Forget social media. Don't take media and the stories of every other company as how it's going to be for you, because for 99.9% of the world, it's not that.
Yeah, it's such a great advice, dude. Well, look, Adi, that concludes your time in the hot seat, bud. Thank you for lending your perspective here on the Secrets of Fail series. Really appreciate you for that, man. And and I think what you're doing is, timing, great leader, visionary. I think what you're doing is very interesting and timeless. And I think, you're going to make a big difference to a lot of people. So kudos to you for that. But thank you for being on the Matt Brown Show, brother. And everybody else, we will see you all again soon. Ciao.